I was standing in my greenhouse, soil under my fingernails, when my husband of 14 years said the words that shattered everything. I didn't sign up to push a wheelchair. The late afternoon sun filtered through the glass panels, casting shadows across the potting bench, where I'd just finished transplanting orchids for a client's wedding. That was 6 hours after my multiple sclerosis diagnosis. My name is Rosalie Vega. At 37, I'd built Terra Botanica from a single pickup truck and a pile of sketches into one of Austin's premier landscape design firms. My hands were my livelihood. They could coax beauty from barren lots, transform corporate courtyards into living art, and sketch garden dreams that became reality. Those same hands had been trembling for 3 months. Dimitri stood in the doorway of my sanctuary, still wearing his crisp polo shirt with the Austin Sports Medicine logo. The man who spent his days rehabilitating torn ACLs and damaged rotator cuffs for professional athletes couldn't look me in the eye. Behind him, I could see our 10-year-old son, Milo's telescope set up in the yard, waiting for tonight's planned stargazing session. "Say that again," I said, setting down my pruning shears carefully because my grip had been unreliable lately. "I said I didn't sign up to push a wheelchair, Rosalie. I work with elite athletes. My whole career is about optimizing human performance, not watching it decline." His voice carried that same clinical detachment he used when explaining treatment plans to his clients. The greenhouse suddenly felt too small, too hot. This morning, we'd driven to the neurologist together. He'd held my hand in the waiting room, promised we'd face whatever came next as a team. Now he stood 20 feet away, but the distance between us felt infinite. Milo appeared in the doorway beside his father, dirt smudged on his cheek from helping me earlier. "Mom, are we still looking at Jupiter tonight? I already adjusted the telescope." I forced my voice to stay steady. "Of course, sweetheart, Jupiter's not going anywhere." But Dimitri was. I could see it in the way he'd already shifted his weight toward the door, in the gym bag I now noticed sitting by his feet. The man who'd proposed to me in this very greenhouse, who'd promised to love me through whatever storms came our way, had already checked out. My diagnosis wasn't even a full day old, and my marriage was dying faster than any doctor predicted my body would. "We need to talk about this rationally," Dimitri said, using his professional voice, "about what's best for everyone, especially Milo." I looked at our son, his face scrunched in confusion, still clutching his astronomy journal where he'd been logging his observations. Then I looked at my hands, steady now despite everything, soil still caked under the nails. These hands had built something from nothing once before. They would have to do it again. "You're right," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "We do need to talk about what's best for Milo. And that's showing him that when life changes the blueprint, we adapt. We don't abandon the project." The greenhouse fell silent except for the gentle hum of the irrigation system. Outside, Jupiter was already rising in the Texas sky, constant and bright, waiting for a 10-year-old boy whose world was about to shift on its axis. But planets keep spinning even when everything changes. And so would we. 6 months before that moment in the greenhouse, life had a rhythm I thought would last forever. My alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. sharp, and I'd find Dimitri already gone for his morning run. He'd leave a protein smoothie for me in the fridge with a sticky note. Fuel for my favorite garden goddess. I'd drink it while reviewing blueprints for Terra Botanica's latest project, a complete redesign of the botanical gardens downtown that would be my career-defining achievement. By 6:30, I'd be waking Milo, who always slept with his astronomy books scattered across his Star Wars comforter. "Mom, did you know that Jupiter has 79 moons?" he'd announce, as if this information couldn't wait until after breakfast. His obsession with space was matched only by his dedication to helping me in the greenhouse, where he'd named every plant and kept detailed growth charts in a notebook covered with planet stickers. Our Victorian house in Austin's Hyde Park neighborhood was organized chaos. Dimitri's exercise equipment in the garage, my drafting table taking up half the dining room, Milo's telescope parts spread across the back porch. My cousin Paloma called it creative dysfunction, but it worked for us, or so I thought. Thursday evenings meant dinner at my mother Carmen's food truck, Cocina de Carmen, parked permanently at a lot on South Congress. The smell of her famous carnitas would draw lines around the block, but family ate first, always. My stepfather Jorge would close his auto repair shop early to help serve customers while my grandmother Esperanza held court at a picnic table, teaching Milo to grow heirloom tomatoes in the small garden beside the truck. "Mijo, you see how this plant leans toward the sun?" Esperanza would say, her weathered hands guiding his small ones. "That's what we do. We find the light and grow toward it, always." The first sign something was wrong came during a site visit to the Driscoll Hotel. I was measuring the courtyard for a living wall installation when the measuring tape slipped from my fingers. Not dropped, slipped, as if my hand had forgotten how to hold. Kenji, my assistant who'd been with Terra Botanica since the beginning, picked it up without comment. The second time it happened, he paused. "Rosalie, when's the last time you took a real break?" he asked, concern creasing his forehead. "I'll rest when the botanical garden project is done," I said, flexing my fingers. They felt thick, clumsy, like wearing invisible gloves. The numbness started gradually. First, just my fingertips, then spreading up my hands. Some mornings, I'd wake up and my left arm would feel like static on a television, all pins and needles with no clear signal. I hid it well, developing workarounds. I'd grip my coffee mug with both hands, blame the Texas heat when I stumbled on job sites, say I was trying a new ergonomic pencil when my sketches became shaky. Dimitri noticed, of course. He was trained to spot physical anomalies. "You're favoring your right side," he'd observe over dinner. "Your gait is off balance." But he said it the way he'd assess an athlete, clinical and detached, already calculating recovery timelines. It was Paloma who finally called me out. She'd stopped by to borrow my truck and found me in the greenhouse, struggling to grip the pruning shears. As a physical therapist, she recognized what Dimitri had chosen to rationalize away. "How long has this been happening?" she asked, gently taking the shears from my trembling hands. 2 months. Maybe 3. "You need to see a neurologist. This week." That night, I told Dimitri I'd made an appointment. He was reorganizing his client files, sorting athletes by sport and injury type. "Good," he said without looking up. "Get it checked. Probably just stress. The botanical garden project has been consuming you." But I saw the way his jaw tightened, how his hands paused for just a moment before returning to his files. He was already categorizing me, I realized, moving me from one column to another in his mental spreadsheet, from asset to liability, from strength to weakness. The morning of my neurology appointment, I stood in my greenhouse, watching the sunrise paint everything gold. Milo found me there, still in his pajamas. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, wrapping his arms around my waist. I held him close, breathing in his little boy's smell of sleep and yesterday's sunshine. "I'm perfect, baby. Just watching the light change everything." I didn't know it would be one of the last mornings where that was true. The neurologist's office smelled like disinfectant and dread. Dr. Patricia Huang had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the sort of doctor who probably delivered bad news with practiced compassion every single day. Dimitri sat beside me in his workout clothes, having come straight from training a quarterback recovering from shoulder surgery. He kept checking his phone until I placed my hand over his. He flinched at my touch. "The MRI results are definitive," Dr. Huang said, pulling up images on her computer screen. "These white spots here are lesions on your brain and spinal cord. They're consistent with multiple sclerosis, specifically relapsing remitting MS." The words hit like physical blows. Multiple. Sclerosis. I knew what it meant in theory, but my mind went blank, like someone had erased all my carefully organized thoughts. What does this mean for her mobility? Dimitri's voice cut through my fog. Not, "What does this mean for us?" or "How do we fight this?" Her mobility. Like I was already a case study. Dr. Huang turned her screen so we could see better. Every MS case is unique. Some patients live full, active lives with minimal symptoms. Others may need mobility aids. The medications available now are remarkably effective at slowing progression. "But she works with her hands," Dimitri pressed. "She climbs scaffolding, operates machinery, builds gardens. What's the timeline for when she can't do that anymore?" I wanted to scream at him to stop talking about me like I wasn't there, but my voice had disappeared somewhere between the lesions on the screen and the future fracturing in front of me. "Mr. Vega, your wife could have many productive years ahead. Physical therapy, medication management, lifestyle modifications. These all make a significant difference. The drive home stretched like a funeral procession. Dimitri gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles while I stared out the window at Austin rushing by. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that someone's world was ending in the silver Honda beside them at the red light. "Why is Daddy crying?" Milo's voice from the back seat shattered the silence. "Daddy's just tired, baby," I managed, though Dimitri hadn't made a sound, but I could see the tears tracking down his face in the side mirror. "Are we still having taco night at Grandma Carmen's truck?" "Of course," I said, though nothing felt certain anymore. At home, Dimitri disappeared into the garage. I could hear weights clanging, his usual response to any emotional situation. I found Milo in the backyard, adjusting his telescope even though it was broad daylight. "Just practicing for tonight," he said. "Jupiter should be really clear. Did you know its great red spot is actually a storm that's been going for hundreds of years?" "That's a long time for a storm," I said, sinking onto the bench beside him. "Yeah, but Jupiter's strong. It can handle it." That evening, Dimitri emerged from the garage, showered and changed. He moved through dinner preparations like a robot, chopping vegetables with surgical precision. When I reached for plates, my hand trembled and one crashed to the floor. "I'll get it," he said quickly, too quickly. "Just sit." "I can clean up a broken plate, Dimitri." "Can you?" The words hung between us like shattered ceramic. After Milo went to bed full of Carmen's tacos and Jorge's stories, I found Dimitri in the greenhouse. My sanctuary had become his confession booth. "I need to be honest with you, Sarah," he said. "Rosalie," I corrected. "My name is Rosalie." He flinched. Even my name had become too much effort. "Rosalie, I can't do this." "Can't do what?" "I work with athletes at their peak. My entire career is built on optimizing performance, achieving physical excellence. I can't come home and watch you deteriorate." Deteriorate? The word tasted like poison. "I was diagnosed 6 hours ago. I'm still the same person who designed an award-winning garden yesterday. But you won't be. Eventually you'll need help. A cane, a walker, a wheelchair." Each mobility aid sounded like a curse word in his mouth. I didn't sign up to push a wheelchair. The greenhouse suddenly felt arctic despite the Texas heat. This man who'd spent 4 years rehabilitating a paralyzed swimmer, who preached about the power of the human spirit to overcome any obstacle, couldn't fathom extending that same faith to his own wife. "What about in sickness and in health?" My voice cracked. That was before I knew what sickness meant. I watched him walk out of my greenhouse, out of our marriage, out of the life we'd built together. Behind me, the orchids I'd transplanted that afternoon stood tall and beautiful, thriving despite being uprooted. They knew something my husband didn't. Sometimes the replanting makes you stronger. The first 3 weeks after Dimitri left were a blur of survival. He'd packed methodically, taking his exercise equipment, client files, and half of everything else with the precision of someone who'd been planning an exit strategy. Milo stood at his bedroom window for hours, telescope forgotten, watching the street for a silver Honda that wasn't coming back. "Is Papa staying at Uncle Roberto's forever?" he asked one morning, pushing cereal around his bowl. "I don't know, baby." "Is it because you're sick?" The truth sat heavy in my throat. Papa needs some time to think. By week 4, I couldn't pretend anymore. My hands shook so badly I couldn't hold a pencil. 2 major clients called to postpone their projects after I showed up to a meeting and dropped my portfolio 3 times. The Botanical Garden Committee sent a polite email suggesting I might want to partner with another firm to ensure the project's success. Translation, you're a liability now. I hit bottom on a Thursday morning. Milo had dressed himself for school, inside-out shirt and mismatched socks, because I couldn't get out of bed. He'd made his own lunch, peanut butter sandwich cut in crooked triangles, apple slices already browning. I found him at my drafting table trying to copy my sketches for a rain garden design. "I'm helping," he said proudly, showing me his wobbly attempt at drawing drainage plans. "So you don't lose all your clients." That's when Esperanza found us. My grandmother had her own key and the timing of someone who knew exactly when she was needed. She took one look at the scene, at her great-grandson trying to save his mother's career with a box of crayons, and pulled us both into her arms. "Mia," she said, "remember what I taught you about the century plants?" "They wait 100 years to bloom," I whispered into her shoulder. "No, they prepare for 100 years, every day growing stronger, deeper roots, waiting for their moment. This is not your ending, Rosalie. This is your deep root season." That afternoon, I forced myself into the greenhouse. Everything had grown wild in my neglect. Vines tangled where they should have been trained, seedlings stretched leggy and desperate for attention. It looked exactly how I felt. Chaos pretending to be a garden. Milo joined me, hauling his astronomy journal. "Mom, look!" He showed me a sketch of Jupiter he'd made, surrounded by its many moons. "See how some moons are closer and some are farther away? But they all orbit together. They don't leave just because Jupiter has a big storm." "When did you get so wise?" "Tuesday," he said seriously, "when I realized Papa was wrong about wheelchairs." That night, unable to sleep, I wheeled my office chair into the greenhouse and really looked at my wild garden. The tomatoes had climbed higher than ever, finding their own support. The herbs had spread into beautiful chaos. Nothing was where I'd planned it, but everything was alive, thriving, adapting. I grabbed my laptop and started researching. MS garden design, accessible landscapes, adaptive tools. By dawn, I'd filled 3 notebooks with ideas, my shaky handwriting covering pages with possibilities instead of limitations. The next morning, I called Kenji. "I need your help building something." "Thank God," he said. "I was about to stage an intervention. What are we building?" "The future." We started with my own garden, creating raised beds at wheelchair height, installing grip-friendly tools, designing pathways wide enough for any mobility aid. Paloma brought her physical therapy knowledge, suggesting specific plants for sensory therapy. Carmen parked her food truck in my driveway every lunch, feeding my growing crew of volunteers. "You're not just building a garden," observed Nell, a concert pianist from my MS support group who'd lost fine motor control in her hands. "You're building a movement." She was right. Word spread through the MS community, then the broader disability network. A landscape architect who understood firsthand what bodies in flux needed from outdoor spaces. My first commissioned accessible garden was for the MS Treatment Center, where I received my infusions. The second was for a children's therapy hospital. Gardens Without Limits, Milo named it, designing our logo, a plant growing through a wheel, roots and spokes intertwined. The speaking invitations started small, local garden clubs, occupational therapy conferences, then bigger stages, landscape architecture symposiums, accessibility summits. Each time, Milo ran my slideshow from backstage, my 10-year-old tech director who'd learned to read his mother's energy and have a chair ready when needed. "My mom doesn't just design gardens," he'd tell anyone who'd listen. "She designs futures for people who thought theirs were over." 1 year after diagnosis, I stood in front of 500 occupational therapists, cane in one hand, clicker in the other. Traditional landscape architecture asks, "What do you want your garden to look like?" Adaptive design asks, "What do you want your garden to feel like? How do you want to move through it? What do you need it to give back to you?" The audience leaned forward, hungry for this perspective. I thought about Dimitri, probably training some athlete to push through barriers right now, unable to see that I'd learned to do the same thing, just differently. MS taught me that the most beautiful gardens aren't the ones that go according to plan, I continued. They're the ones that adapt, persist, and bloom anyway, just like us. 3 years after that day in the greenhouse, I stood backstage at the Denver Convention Center, listening to 5,000 people fill the auditorium. The International Adaptive Design Summit represented everything I'd never imagined possible when my hands first started shaking. Architects, landscape designers, occupational therapists, and accessibility advocates from 30 countries had come to hear about Gardens Without Limits. 5 minutes, Ms. Vega, the stage manager said, adjusting my microphone. Milo appeared beside me, now 13 and nearly my height, holding my copper cane. "You won't need it today," he said confidently. "Your walking is good, but I'll be right here if you change your mind." "My technical director, everyone," I said to the stage crew who'd already fallen in love with my son over the 3-day conference. I smoothed my green dress, the one I'd worn to my first major presentation, now my lucky charm. Through a crack in the curtains, I could see the massive screens displaying my work. Therapeutic gardens at children's hospitals, accessible community spaces in low-income neighborhoods, sensory gardens at memory care facilities. Each image represented someone who'd been told their gardening days were over until we proved otherwise. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed, "please welcome the founder of Gardens Without Limits and pioneer in adaptive landscape design, Rosalie Vega." I walked onto that stage steady and strong, one of my good days when MS felt like a whisper instead of a shout. The applause washed over me as I reached the podium, looking out at thousands of faces eager to learn how to make the world more accessible, one garden at a time. 3 years ago, I began, letting my voice fill the space. Someone very important to me said they didn't sign up to push a wheelchair. At the time, those words felt like a death sentence. Today, I want to thank that person for giving me the push I actually needed. I clicked to my first slide, a photo of my wild, overgrown greenhouse from those dark early days. "This is what giving up looks like," I said. And this, clicking to the next image of that same greenhouse transformed into an accessible paradise, is what giving into possibility looks like. As I spoke about root systems and resilience, about designing for bodies in flux, about the radical act of assuming everyone deserves beauty and growth, I spotted movement in the audience. 5th row, aisle seat, a familiar figure leaning forward. Dimitri. My next words caught for just a moment before I found my rhythm again. The thing about accessible design is that it's not just for people with disabilities. It's for everyone. Because we all have bodies that change. We age, we break, we heal, we adapt. The gardens that acknowledge this aren't just accessible, they're honest. I moved through my presentation, showing the statistics. How our designs increased therapy participation by 73%. How patients reported improved mental health scores. How communities with accessible gardens saw increased intergenerational interaction. But I kept returning to that 5th row, to the man who'd run from these possibilities. "I want to share something personal," I said, departing from my prepared remarks. "When I was diagnosed with MS, someone told me they couldn't watch me deteriorate. But here's what they missed. I wasn't deteriorating. I was transforming. Every adaptation I made taught me something new about design. Every limitation revealed an innovation." I clicked to a video of Milo interviewed last month for a documentary about our work. "My mom's MS is part of our family." His recorded voice filled the auditorium. "It's not the enemy, it's just another factor in the design, like soil type or climate zone. You work with what you have and make something beautiful anyway." When I reached my conclusion, I looked directly at Dimitri. "To the person who didn't sign up to push a wheelchair, thank you. Thank you for giving me room to roll forward, because you were right about one thing. You didn't sign up for this journey. But I did. Every single day I sign up again, and look where it's led." The screens behind me filled with images. Thousands of people in accessible gardens, children in wheelchairs planting vegetables, elderly people with walkers harvesting herbs, my own Milo teaching adaptive gardening on his YouTube channel that now had 200,000 subscribers. "We don't design for the bodies we wish we had," I concluded. "We design for the bodies we have, the bodies we're becoming, the bodies that deserve beauty and growth and connection to the earth. That's not limitation, that's liberation." The standing ovation started in the back and rolled forward like a wave. 5,000 people on their feet, applauding not just for me, but for the idea that adaptation wasn't defeat. It was evolution. I saw Dimitri stand too, slowly, his face unreadable from this distance. But he stood. Milo burst onto the stage with a bouquet of cosmos from our demonstration garden, grown by conference attendees in the accessible greenhouse we'd built in the convention center. "Mom, you made them all cry," he said into the microphone, causing laughter to ripple through the tears. "She does that a lot, but in a good way." As we walked off stage together, my hand on his shoulder for balance and love, not just support, I thought about gardens and storms and things that grow stronger in difficult soil. Dimitri was in the audience, but he wasn't my audience anymore. These 5,000 people were. The millions who needed accessible gardens were. The future we were building, one raised bed at a time, was. The convention center's accessible garden buzzed with attendees examining every detail of our demonstration space when I found Dmitri waiting by the raised herb beds. He stood with his hands in his pockets, studying the sign that read, "Touch, smell, taste. A garden for every sense." "The rosemary is planted at exactly the right height," he said without looking at me. "Someone in a wheelchair could reach it perfectly." "That's the point." He turned then, and I saw 3 years written on his face, new lines around his eyes, his athletic frame somehow smaller. "Rosalie, I need to say something." "You don't need to say anything, Dmitri." "Yes, I do." He gestured at the garden around us. "This is extraordinary. You're extraordinary, and I was a coward." Before I could respond, Milo appeared with Casper, the chef I'd been dating for 6 months. Casper had lost his leg in Afghanistan and grew the most incredible accessible rooftop garden, where he sourced ingredients for his restaurant. His daughter Luna, 7 and fierce, wheeled up in her custom chair decorated with hand-painted vines. "Mom, Casper wants to know if you're ready for the celebration dinner," Milo said, then noticed Dmitri. His expression shifted, protective and cool. "Oh, hi, Papa." "Hello, Milo, you've grown." "Yeah, that happens when you're gone for 3 years." The silence stretched until Luna broke it. "Are you the one who left because Miss Rosalie got sick? That wasn't very nice." From the mouths of babes, Casper placed a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder while extending his other to Dmitri. "Casper Reeves, I've heard about you." Dmitri shook his hand, clearly processing the sight of Casper's prosthetic leg, visible below his shorts. Here was a man who understood adaptation, who saw it as strength rather than weakness. "Mom doesn't need anyone to push her wheelchair," Milo said suddenly. "She designed ramps into everything. She planned for her future. You just ran from it." "Milo," I said gently. "No, he's right," Dmitri said. "I did run. I'm still running, actually. Moved to Phoenix, opened a sports performance center. Dating a marathon runner who's never had so much as a sprained ankle." He gave a bitter laugh. "I'm terrified every day that something will happen to her. That's what you do to yourself when you abandon someone for being human." Luna tugged on my dress. "Ms. Rosalie, can we go eat now? I'm hungry and you promised to teach me about companion planting tomorrow." "We should go," I agreed. "The whole team is waiting at the restaurant." As we moved toward the exit, Dmitri called out, "I kept the orchids." I paused. "What?" "The ones you transplanted that day. I went back and got them. They're in my office in Phoenix. I water them every day and think about how wrong I was." His voice cracked. "They're thriving, just like you." "Orchids are resilient," I said simply. "They adapt to new environments. Not everyone can do that." The celebration dinner filled an entire section of Casper's restaurant. My mother, Carmen, had closed her food truck early to cook alongside him, creating a fusion feast that had everyone groaning with happiness. Esperanza held court at the head of the table, regaling everyone with stories about my childhood stubbornness that clearly served me well. Jorge showed off pictures of the accessible garden he'd installed at his auto shop. Paloma introduced her new girlfriend, an adaptive sports coach she'd met at one of my workshops. Kenji presented me with a custom garden tool he'd designed for my bad hand days, engraved with, "For the woman who redesigned the future." "A toast," Casper announced, standing with his prosthetic leg planted firmly and raising his glass, "to Rosalie, who took the landscape of loss and planted it with possibility." "To Mom," Milo added, "who shows people that different isn't less, it's just different." My mother clinked her glass with a fork until everyone quieted. Mihija taught us something important. When life says you can't, you find a new way to can. When someone walks out, you roll forward. And when the world isn't accessible, you don't wait for permission to redesign it. After dinner, back at my house, I found Milo in the greenhouse doing homework. Luna had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from the conference excitement. Casper was cleaning up the kitchen, singing off key to the radio. "You okay, baby?" I asked Milo. "It was weird seeing Papa," he admitted, "but also kind of sad. He looked scared the whole time." "Some people are afraid of change. Not us, though." He grinned. "We're like those plants that grow in concrete. What did Grandma Esperanza call them? Resilient?" "Yeah, resilient." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of 3 orchids in full bloom on a Phoenix windowsill. No words needed. I deleted it and pulled Milo close. "Want to check on Jupiter?" "Always," he said. "Did you know it has a new moon? They just discovered it. Even planets keep changing." Later that night, I sat in my accessible greenhouse, now a testing ground for new adaptive tools and techniques. 3 years ago, a man told me he didn't sign up to push a wheelchair. He was right. He didn't sign up for growth, for evolution, for the beautiful complexity of a life fully lived. He signed up for stasis, for safety, for the guarantee that nothing would ever challenge his perfect picture. But I signed up for all of it. The shaky hands and the steady days, the cane walks and the solo dances in my kitchen, the loss that became liberation, the diagnosis that became my greatest teacher. MS didn't make me weak. It made me innovative. It didn't limit my world. It expanded it to include millions of people who'd been waiting for someone to say, "Yes, you belong in the garden too." Some mornings I wake up and my legs work perfectly. Other mornings I need my walker. But every morning I wake up grateful for the journey that started with those devastating words in a greenhouse and led to this, a life of purpose, a love that understands adaptation, a son who sees strength in difference, and gardens blooming accessible and beautiful across the world. To anyone facing their own diagnosis, their own abandonment, their own moment of everything changing, you have 2 choices. You can see the wheelchair, or you can see the wheels. You can mourn the garden you planned, or you can plant the garden you need. Choose the wheels. Choose the wild garden. Choose resilience. It's worth it, I promise. If this story resonated with you, if you're facing your own challenges or know someone who is, please like this video and share it. Your share might be the hope someone needs today. Comment below with your own story of resilience. Let's build a garden of support together. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Remember, we don't grow in spite of our challenges. We grow because of them.